Okay, welcome back to today's class. I think as a recap of what we covered yesterday, we looked at um, um, I think we looked at control structures, and we said that they control how the program flows. We looked at various examples like selection, and we looked at the implementations of selection using if, if else, if else if. Then we also looked at nested loops. I believe we also discussed the switch statement, and we said for a switch statement, you can only you can test one condition for multiple values. Then yeah, so those were and we also look at the ternary operator, which allows you to assign maybe say something like a value to a variable based on some certain condition. Then we looked at iteration or repetition or looping, and we looked at for loops. We looked at do loop, and we looked at do while loop. Then I think we also looked at branching, where we said now this breaks normal execution and it goes and starts executing codes at a different point. And we looked at examples like throw. We looked at break, continue, and return. So I think that's basically what we covered yesterday. So today I want us to look at something else. Today we'll start looking at things called arrays. We had defined data types, and we say JavaScript supports two types of data types, that is primitive data types and object data types. So primitive data types are like the ones we were looking at before, like string and boolean and numbers and undefined and null. So those ones are primitive. But then we have the other ones are not really civilized per se, but they're referred to as objects. So objects, and we're going to look at an example of an object, which is an array, and see how that works out. Of course, we have different types of objects, though we had said that initially in JavaScript, everything is considered an object. But for purposes of simplicity, those data types that we had looked at in terms of that is string, even though they are an object, they can still be considered as a primitive type. Then numbers also is an object, but can be treated as a primitive type. Likewise is boolean and and uh, and undefined and null. So today we want to look at what we call arrays and what arrays actually do. So what is an array? An array is a data type that can hold more than one value. So let's just increase my font. Sorry. So arrays are data types that is capable of holding more than a single value. So whenever you want to store multiple values, you have options of defining multiple variables. I'll give us a scenario, then we'll see value. So whenever you want to store multiple values, then you can use multiple variables. But at the same time, if they're going to be of the same type, like all of them are numbers or all of them are string or all of them are boolean or something like that, then it's much easier to use an array. So let me give you a classic example. Let's say I want to define fruits. So I'll open Visual Studio Code over here. I'll introduce a new file and I'll call it arrays. So we have arrays here. Of course, I will show them side by side with the browser. Okay, I will go to browser, and over here, click a new window. I'll close this. Then I come here and I'll say I want to see them side by side, like that. So I'm able to now see my code and my window on this other side. Now, so let's talk about arrays. And I was saying, so I'll do emmet here and I'll say arrays. So here, let's say we want to define variables that will hold fruits, three fruits. So I can come here and I can do a script and I declare a variable. So let fruit one is equals to mango. Then I can go on and on. I can type all these other fruits that I have over here. So these are an example of where I'm using the same data type and I'm defining to things. I'm referring rather to things that are almost in the same category. But now I am forced to declare different variables altogether. Now, to avoid this kind of a thing, we can use an array instead. So we can use an array instead of this. So how we define array is something like this. So there are two ways of defining arrays. So you can define an array as let then you define the name of your array. Of course, it's a variable and it will take all the other conditions that we said that a variable should have. Not they cannot have special characters, cannot have spaces other than underscore, rather cannot have special characters other than underscore. It can must start with a letter. It cannot be more than 56 characters long, and so forth and so forth. So once we define the variable, then we put the square brackets. These ones here, then we put in the values that we are working with as far as arrays is concerned. So I've converted these five arrays, these five variables into one single variable, which is now an object. So this is how you define an array. Also, you can also define using the array keyword or array constructor. So something like this. What have I not closed? Okay. Yeah, so something like this. So I can let vegetable is a new array and it contains the following values. Well, new might not be necessarily important to use. I can actually just define them without the new keyword like that. So depending on what you're comfortable with, you can either use method one or method two. I prefer to use method one any day, anytime. It's much easier for me to be able to visualize it like this. So this is how you define your arrays. Now, once you've defined your arrays, what then how do you access the array variable? So accessing the array variable. So if I wanted to access the array variables, these are elements in the array. So I'll just mask this. As you're looking at these arrays element are indexed. So fruits has mango, which is index 0, apple, which is index 1, banana, which is index 2, orange, index 3, and so forth and so forth. So the elements in the array are indexed in terms of where they are positioned. So mango is position 0. So they are 0 based index, which means they start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth and so forth. So if I need to access an array element, then I'll need to refer to the array name with the um, with the index of that particular element. Say, for example, I wanted to extract banana. If I wanted to extract banana, I'll come and count. Mango is 0, apple is 1, and banana is 2. So I can simply come and say here, document dot write. Then I'll say the sorry the value of in, index, maybe say 2 is, so I put fruits 2. So when I do that and I run my code, it shows up on the browser over here. You should be able to see that the value of the index number 2, which is 0, 1, and 2, is actually banana. So if I put index number 0, it should show me index 0 here. Then index 0 should actually be mango. So you can see, for you to access the array element, simply put the variable name, then put square brackets and put the index of the element that you are looking for. So that is how you access the array elements. Okay. Now, this is interesting because arrays are going to be a very important tool that you're going to use over and over again for purposes of fetching data and also displaying data. So I need you to pay very, very keen attention on how we use arrays. So we've looked at the definition, what an array is. We've looked at how we can declare it inside our JavaScript, and we've also looked at how we can be able to access the elements of the array. That is by defining, by mentioning the array name, then putting square brackets, and inside the square brackets, we list the index of the element that we're interested in. So because this is going to be very interesting, let's look at other things that we can do with arrays. So arrays have a lot of methods. So we have array methods. Because this is data type, this is an object data type, it can have very many methods. One of the methods we have is push. So I'll put the methods here. So method number one is push. So push will allow us to add an element of the end of the array. So I have mangoes here. Let's say I want to add avocado at the end here. So if I wanted to add avocado at the end of that, so I'll simply say push, then I'll put here avocado like that. That should be able to add avocado as part of this array element. Now, what I can simply do, I can output the value of that array. So probably maybe I'll mask this and I can say document dot write. Then I can simply write the fruits. So when I write the fruits at this particular point, fruits at this particular point, you should be able to see now I have sorry. So now I have mangoes, apple, then I have avocado at the end. If I wanted to add another one, again, I simply say fruits dot push, then I simply say carrots. I don't know if carrot is a fruit, but something of the sort. So you can see now it has added carrot at the end. So push will add an element at the end of that array. Now, the opposite of push is shift. If I wanted to remove an element in the array, to remove the first element, remove, this is actually shift, and shift will remove element, will actually, yeah, remove the first element of the array. So shift will remove the first element of the array. So if I say shift, then fruits dot shift. At this particular point, you can see fruits actually has avocado as the last element and mango as the first element. So when I say shift, it's simply going to remove mango, right? So I can simply say fruits dot shift. And then when I write, you'll see now I'm starting with apple, but actually the actual array had mango. So that ensures that that tells me that it has removed the first element in the array. Now, what if I want to add an element at the beginning? Remember, push will add at the end. If I want to add an element at the beginning, so three is unshift, and unshift adds an element to the beginning of the array. So let's say at the beginning of the array, I want to add a new fruit, and I want to add maybe say something like kiwi. So I'll simply say this is actually unshift, not and shift like that. Yeah, that's the correct that's the correct spelling. That's the correct spelling. So when you're on shift, you add an element to the beginning of the array. So I can add purple at the beginning of the array like that. Then when I write it down here, then I'll now see that purple has been added at the beginning of the array. I started with mango, then I had all these other items, then I added avocado and carrots, then I removed mango using this shift over here. Then now I have added purple where the mango actually was and stuff like that. So you can see it makes it very easy for us to be able to work with arrays. Now, sometimes you're interested in knowing what is the index of an item in the array. So I want to know what position is maybe say carrots holding as far as my array is concerned. So the fourth method is indexof. So this one returns the index of the first occurrence of an element from that particular array. So let's say, for example, I want the index of bananas. So then I want to put there. So maybe here say console, not console, but let me use document dot write, and I'll simply say here the position of banana is then index. So I've said here index is fruits.index of banana. So I'll get the index of banana, I'll store it inside this variable. Then I just want to show us where banana is actually located. So this should be document. So if I did that, I will see the index of banana is 2 because purple is 0, apple is 1, and banana is 2. So we can go on and on like that. So that is these are very important methods as you're going to see when you start working with arrays. They tend to we tend to use this method a lot. Then sometimes you want to search if this array contains something. So if you want to search if the array contains something, you will use includes. Includes is a method which will check if the array is has the element that you're looking for. So, for example, let me say I was adding files and I want to check if this file has already been added. So, I'm using an array to track the files that have been added. So, if somebody attempts to add the file again, I'll check if that file already exists so that I can tell the user as appropriately. So, the includes method is the one that that searches through the array and checks if an element exists. So let me give an example. Let's say we want to check if the array has bananas or mangoes. So if the array has mangoes, we'll simply say is found is my variable, and I'll say go to the array called fruits and then check if it includes, then I'll tell it what to search. Then if I did that, then I'll simply say mango is found in the array. That is false because I actually removed mango by using this shift here. Shift will remove mango because it is the first element here. But if I say something like an apple, and I put here apple, so you see apple is found because now I have apple as part of this array. So apple is here. So I can even do carrots, the ones that I added dynamically. So you can see carrots is found also. So carrots is also found in that array. So these are very, very powerful methods that the array actually supports. Now, sometimes we want to flatten the array. If you want to flatten the array, which means you want to convert the array into a string, that is, then of course you can specify which separator you want for the string. The default is comma. So sometimes you want to just get the array, flatten the array so that it can be able to output the values of the array. So to output the values of the array, we use the join method. So this join method, it will join the elements of an array into a string based on a separator. You can put any separator that you want. By default, it uses a comma, but you can use a semicolon, you can use a dash, really whatever it is that you want to use to output the values of the array. So here, I could simply say something like fruit string will be the fruits array, then I use the join method, then I'll join with a comma separated with a space. Then of course, I output the values of string. As you can see over here, the fruits are as follows. Well, I can put a break here so that now they start on a new line like that. So you can see the fruits are pawpaw, apple, banana, oranges, and so forth and so forth. Now, when I said document.write the array name, over here, what it did is that it flattened the array on my behalf. So it applied this method on its own prior to displaying. So that's why you can see when I said the write the array over there, it simply outputs as a string, which is what we have actually achieved down here. So join method allows you to flatten the array or convert it into a string that is comma separated. Right? The other thing that's very, very important as far as arrays are concerned is sorting. Sorting arrays is very, very key. Let me give you an example of where sorting comes in. So, well, I'll just use the seventh method, sorting. So sort will sort the arrays in this in ascending or descending order depending on how you want to do it. Of course, by default, it will sort it in ascending order. If you want to send it in descending order, that's going to be a different story altogether. We have to use yes, we're going to use the sort method, but we're going to use a different approach altogether. So if I wanted to sort the array, for example, this array has multiple elements, as you can see over here. Well, I'll just let me just make sure that these these fields are not are masked out, so they are not as many, so that my output is not as much. So when I sort the fruits and I output it like that, you'll see now I have apple, avocado, banana, carrots, mango, oranges, all the way to the end. So this allows me to be able to sort out the elements. What if I wanted to sort them in reverse? After I sort the array, I can actually come back and reverse. So reverse here will actually sort them in the other order. So first of all, it will sort them, then it will reverse the array, which means from the make the last element, the first element, the second last, the second element, and so on and so on. So it simply does a mirror image of the array. So if you wanted to sort out in descending manner, because the sorting is by default ascending. If you wanted to sort by ascending, then you just do a reverse. Now you see I've joined them. I can only do fruits dot sort. Then I can come here and say fruits dot. There's fruits dot sort. Then I can come here and say fruits dot reverse. It's the same thing. JavaScript allows us to chain. So instead of since I'm talking about the same fruit and I'm just applying different methods to it, I can simply come and just join the two methods together. It will perform the first one, then perform the second one. So I don't need to do them separately. And you can see it works out very, very cleanly. So sort is very important. Now there'll be just a slight problem with sorting, and especially if you're going to work with things that are numbers. If you have numbers, it won't work as expected. Let's just look at that. So let's say we have numbers here, and let's give some random numbers like let me say 40, maybe 100, maybe 1. Just random numbers. I could 5, maybe 25, 60, 10. I can do 80, and maybe 110, something of this sort. Yeah. So I have some numbers over here. Now, of course, I'm expecting that if I sort this array, so if I say numbers dot sort rather like that, it should be able to sort out the numbers for me. So I simply say numbers sorted will be, well, I don't need to join it. I can just, okay, I can just print the numbers here. It will still be, sorry, document.write. So it's just remembering what I did before. So if I sort out those numbers, look at how it looks like. So let me put it like this. So this is maybe say 130. So look at this. 1, 10, 100, 10, 30, 25, 40. This is not how numbers are sorted, right? So if you look at it, if you look at the sort method, it will try to sort these things alphabetically, which might not be what we would be looking for. So for you to sort numbers, you can't use this sort method directly as it is. Now what we're going to do is this. So to sort this number, we're going to use another method. So we're going to say numbers dot sort. Okay. Then after sorting, we're going to run a callback function that will return that will take two elements A and B. That's the first number and the current number. Then what is going to happen? We're going to return A minus B. So what it's going to do is going to look through all the elements in the array. So take the first element and the second element. It will check if the first element is greater than the second element, then it will switch their position. Then come to the second element and third element and continue on like that until it is done. So that is why this is important to work with like that. So it will definitely help us a long way in trying to sort numbers. So this will sort in ascending manner. Sorry. So this sorts in ascending manner. This one will sort in ascending order. So if I did that, now you can say I have 1, 5, 10, 25, and now actually these things are sorted as numbers. So very, very important. If you're going to be sorting numbers, then you have, don't just use sort, use a callback function, compare the current number and the next number, and if you subtract them, that is the current number and second number, you return it, it will check if the first number is second greater than the second number, then swap the position, and it will continue on like that until it is done with all the elements. Now, if you want to sort it out in the reverse, that is from largest to smallest, you simply say B minus A. So if you say B minus A here, then you will see now it sorts it in the reverse. So when you're sorting out numbers, that is how this works out. Very, very important. Again, when it comes to arrays, these methods that I've listed over here are going to be very, very helpful. That is shift. There's shift, there's unshift. By the way, there's one I forgot. There's pop. You can use pop to remove the last element. I don't know why I forgot pop. If you want to remove a last element in the array, like I want to remove this 1030, I can simply come here and say numbers dot pop, 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 pop. What am I doing? So numbers.pop will remove the last element of the array. So if I did that, you're going to see now I don't have the 1030 is not there because it has been removed from the list. In as much as I've sorted this in, let me sort it out back in ascending order. So if I set it up in ascending manner, you'll see I don't have the last element over here. So pop will remove the last element, shift will remove the first. So shift removes the first element, dot pop removes the last element. And shift adds an element to the beginning of array, push adds an element to the end of the array. Indexof will get us the index of the item in the array, and of course includes will check if the array contains that particular element. Then join will allow us to flatten the array, which means we can convert it into a string which has a separated. The separated could be a comma, it could be a semicolon, it could be a full colon, it could be angle brackets. If you want to talk with to have angle brackets as your separator, you can really use anything for that. Then of course finally sort allows us to be able to sort arrays either in ascending or descending manner. And you'll say by default sort just works on strings, and it will assume that everything you're working on is a string. But since we might not want to work with strings, only want to work with numbers, then we can use the second method over here, which now we use still the sort method, but then we use a callback function that will take two numbers, that is the current and the previous, and compare if they are greater than each other or less than each other. Then it will be able to swap their location, and will continue on for the rest of the elements in the array, and that is how we sort the elements. Then of course this is what arrays do. And I want you to pay very keen attention. Arrays are going to be a very important part of our everyday activity as far as JavaScript is concerned. And actually, not just JavaScript, but most of the any other programming languages that we have out there. Arrays are very, very powerful. They help us to do things very, very easily. All right. So maybe the other thing that you might need to do is to look through the array. You might also want to look through the array. Say maybe, for example, I want to add all these numbers together. Of course, I know there's an easier way of adding up these numbers together using other array methods, but we're going to save that for probably next time. For now, let's just assume that I want to go through all the elements in the array, and I want to sum up the values of the numbers in the array. So if I want to sum up the values of numbers in the array, so what I'll do here is sum sum up the values in the array. So what I'll do is I'll declare a variable called sum, and I'll put it to 0. Then I can use a for loop like that. Then I'll be able to now sum the numbers like this. So for I is equals to 0, I is less than, then I'll take the numbers array, then I'll get the length property. So length is a property, not a method. So when I take the length property, it will count how many elements are in the array. Then I increment I by 1. Then after that, I'll simply say sum is sum of numbers. Remember we said when we are accessing an array element, we have to specify the index. So because you're going to start at 0, then going to go to 1, 2, 3, all the way to how many numbers are in the array. So the I will represent the index that you're working with. So I'll take the current sum, then I'll add it to the current element of the array. So the first one will be sum first will be 0, then the first will be 40, so 0 plus 40. Second will be 40 plus 100, which is 140. Third will be 140 plus 1, which is, so it goes on like that until it finishes. Then from here, I'll simply say the sum of numbers is, then here, instead of that, I'll simply put the sum like that. So when I do that, you'll see the sum of all those numbers are 1291. That is 1291. So if I add all these things together, that is what I end up with. So this is one way of looping through the array. So you can use a for loop to loop through all the elements in the array. Now, the other method which I like is using the for loop, using a for each. So option number 2, so this was option 1. So this was option 1, using a for loop. Then you have option 2. I can still let sum be 0. I'll mask that out. So I can have option 2 using for each. So when you are using a for each loop on the other side, so I'll simply pick the array name itself. So I'll say here numbers. Then I'll use a for each. Now for each will require me to use a callback function. So I'll say function. Then it will take the current number in each of the loops. So which is, I can call the number n or num, maybe something like that. Then of course now I loop inside here. So here I can say sum is sum plus number. So this you can see now it becomes easier because num will represent, so what it's going to do, it's going to take these numbers and it will pick these elements. Then it goes element by element. So it comes to the first one, so it takes 40. So 40 becomes num. So sum is sum plus 40 over here. So you can be able to see that now I'll be able to serve sum as 40. So sum will be 40. Then it goes to the second one. Num is now 100, so it will be 100 plus 40 on 40. Then it goes on like that all the way to the end. So you can either use a for loop like this or a for each loop like this. But as I've mentioned, I like using a for each loop. So again, whatever is going to be comfortable with you, well, please be comfortable with what works for you. For me, I would prefer option number two, but of course, even option number one works. Again, as you can see, this one will still be able to add them up together. Now, let me just come here and maybe say add something like 2500. So see, it's still able to add those numbers up together on their own. So that is how you loop through the elements in the array. Now, I think that is enough information on how we can work with arrays as an object data type in JavaScript. As you can see, again, we can use it to store multiple values. By the way, the values don't necessarily need to have the same data type. You can mix and match data types, and an array can also include other arrays inside it. So when you're working with arrays, it's not restricted to having the same data type, but it will simply allow us to hold more than one variable. That is how it is designed to work. All right. So that's arrays, and I think I will take a break for arrays. Then we can discuss our next topic, which is error handling. How do we handle errors inside our JavaScript program? Because we will definitely end up with errors, and of course, as a good practice, we need to trap errors and prevent them from breaking our application when it is executing. Errors will break our applications when it is executing. Now, JavaScript is a translated language. So syntax errors will prevent it from executing. So the compiler will complain about syntax errors. These are areas in grammar. For example, you're using a keyword, you're trying to redeclare a variable which is not which cannot be redeclared. You're trying to assign a value to a constant and all these kind of things. So I mean, when it comes to syntax, assigning a variable to a constant, that is not a syntax error, but trying to declare a variable that was declared is definitely going to be a syntax error. So the compiler will not compile your code even to begin with. So syntax errors cannot be executed; they have to be corrected before you compile your program and it is deployed. Now, so let me just create another file here. I'll call it error handling and debugging, or let me just call it errors.html. So here we're going to talk about error handling and debugging. So errors, error handling, and debugging. So we said we have different types of errors. We have what we call syntax errors. Syntax errors are errors in grammar. So errors in grammar, as far as the compiler is concerned. So each programming language has its own compiler, and they understand things differently. So maybe let me just stop this, then run the new errors file like that. Sorry, like that. So syntax errors. I'll give you a classical example of a syntax error. So let me declare here let x. So I'll do a script. Shall I do it outside body? I'll do a script here and I'll say let x is equals to 10, something like that, right? Then I can say let y is equals to 20. Then I can write here a function sum which takes two numbers a and b like that. Then I'll return a plus b. Then I come down here and I say here again let x is equals now 30. Now this is a syntax error. As you can see, even if I was to call this function here and then I say sum, I simply say document.write document.write. The value of x plus y is the sum of then I'll say x, here I'll say, and y is Then I'll call that function like that. Okay, so this should work out. Ideally, this should work out, as you can see. But you can see there's no output on the screen because I have a syntax error. Why? I have declared x over here using let, and then I'm trying to redeclare it here. I cannot redeclare this thing because they're in the same scope. So once I define x, I cannot be able to redeclare it, but I can assign its value, right? So either if I was to use var, because var allows for redeclaration, you'll be able to see, why am I not seeing the value here? It should actually come out. Uh, well, let me use a template string. I like using template strings. Let me use a template string. The right. Well, let me just say a template string. The sum of x and y is something like that. Why is it not okay? Well, that looks okay. Actually, this should go inside. Then I can declare it as a variable. Yeah, that should be okay. Why is it not writing? That's actually okay. Let me check if there's any errors on the console. Identifier x has already been declared. So I have already declared x, so I cannot redeclare it again. So you can see again, you can see that's a problem, and that is definitely why this is not working. So if I remove this, then you can see now the program is actually working fine. So whenever you have syntax errors, the compiler will refuse to compile your program, and of course, your JavaScript code will not work. So those ones are called syntax errors. I can omit these equal to here. That becomes still a syntax error because variable assignment means that I have to have variable name, then I put an assignment operator there so that it's able to work. So if you miss out the syntax as far as the program is concerned, the compiler will complain and of course not load your content, or rather just report an error and it will forget about it. So actually, for you to be able to view what errors you have, you can just right click on your browser, go to inspect, then you go to console here on the console. So any errors you have that are syntax errors are going to be displayed on the console here. So let me just remove this, for example. So you can see it complains there's an uncaught error at line number 51. Line number, is it line number 51? This is not very accurate. And it's not accurate because I am mixing up HTML and JavaScript. So that's why it's telling me the error is on line number 50. But actually, the error is not on number 50, it's actually on line number 10, line number 12, so to speak. So again, when you mix and match these things, you will now have issues with where these errors are going to be displayed. Of course, if I click on the error, it will tell me exactly where it is. So you can see it is here. Now it's put 50 because some things were loaded, as you can see over here. The other things that were loaded based on the things that I have on my screen. So it has pushed the things downwards a bit. So that's why it's a bit of a challenge to work with that. So, but nonetheless, you will use the inspector to be able to check for any errors in your code. So right click on the page, go to inspect, then make sure you're on the console tab. It will be able to show you the errors from there. So once you correct your errors, you'll see the console becomes very, very clean. There's no error. So as far as you're concerned, it will output whatever you need output. All right. So that's a syntax error. Now, the other kind of errors we have are logical errors. Now, logical errors are not very straightforward to get. So we also have logical errors. Logical errors are errors in logic. So, for example, I want to sum A and B here, then I forget and say A times B. Now, this is summation, but this is a product. So you can still see it's going to give me a value, but the sum of 10 and 20 is not 200. This operation here is actually wrong. It should be plus. So when it comes to logical errors, you just need to now troubleshoot your program from top to bottom, find out where the logic is missing at, then from there you can be able to fix it and the program works properly. So for logical errors, we're not going to focus on that right now. Now, what we're going to do on the other hand is sometimes we have what we call runtime errors. So we also have runtime errors, runtime, runtime errors. So for the runtime errors, these are the errors which are going to be caught or they're going to show themselves up when you're executing your program. Let's say we have another function here that divides A and B. So I'm not going to throw the error. I'm just going to return A divided by B. So when I can come down here and I say the value of A divided by B is, I'll give you the value, right? So the value of X divided by Y is, this is divide, right? So value of A divided by B, well, I can put a break down here so that they are on different lines. Yeah, like that. So let me just hide this. So you can see the sum is 200, but the division is zero point 0.5. So if I divide 10 by 20, I get zero point 0.5. Now what will happen if I want to observe, so I'll come to expect here, then I'll come to console. Of course, usually you'll get the errors before it comes to console. So what would happen if I said here that y is 0? If I said here that y is 0, the first will work. The second one will give me infinity. Actually, it has given me infinity, but ideally it should have told me, you cannot divide a number by 0. So ideally it should have thrown an error for me. So what I could do here is I would say if b is equals to 0, then throw an error. So you see the first one will work, but the second one will not work because I've told you to throw an error, which means you cannot divide by 0. I think we looked at this last time. Now, what if I was to write this and I wanted to capture that error? So what I would have done here is I would have said, before you execute this portion of code, I'll say try. So this is how you handle errors. I'll say try, then I will take this statement and put it inside the try. Okay. Now the try has a catch because now you can see I have not caught the error. So I'll say try that. If it does not work, catch the error. Then after catching the error, then what do you do with the error? Now I can tell you the each of the. Now you can see I don't have now a problem because I have caught the error. The only thing is that I have not said what should be done if the error is caught. So what I'll say is I can simply say here document dot right? Then I can say an error occurred and the error is you cannot divide a number by 0. So for the second portion, it's not going to execute this. It's going to try and execute this portion of code. If any error is thrown, then it's going to catch that particular error. Then I'm going to output that error below as such. So I'll simply say do a break, then type the word an error occurred. Then maybe you can describe what that error is. So an error occurred, you're attempting to divide a number by 0. That's what the error.message does. It will give you the message that is a pointer on the error. And that is how you do your error handling. Most of the code that you're going to be writing, you first of all have to try to do a try. Then if everything works fine, that is good. If something happens, then do a catch. And the catch you can display it either as a message, you can output it on the console.log, or you can even output it on the screen. So if I wanted to output it on a message, I'll simply put here an alert. So alert is a JavaScript. Obviously, you can see here an alert, an error occurred. Then the message is you cannot divide a number by 0, which is what I'm technically trying to achieve over here. So you cannot divide a number by 0, which is technically what I'm trying to achieve over here. Now again, if there's no error, like for example, this one is going to be maybe say 5. So you'll see there's not going to be an error and the values are actually going to come out very, very nicely. So that's how we do error handling in JavaScript. We use the try catch method. Of course, we can use throw to throw errors, especially when we are writing our own functions and we expect the users to put in correct data. And probably maybe if they violated some of the policies that you're trying to do, then we can throw them errors. And then once you call it this program, we can actually nicely, output these errors as far as our user interface is concerned. So that is how we do error handling and debugging as far as JavaScript is concerned. Now, remember I've said we have three types of errors, and by the way, error handling is all about runtime errors. When you're going to have errors that can happen when the program is running, that's where now we do the error handling. Maybe you're trying to access a file that does not exist. Maybe you're trying to run a function that has not been defined. Maybe you're trying to divide a number by zero, and any other mistake that any user can make. Then these are things that are going to happen when the program is executing, and that's why we call them runtime errors. And runtime errors are the ones that we handle using the try catch method. The syntax errors, on the other hand, will be handled by the compiler, as you've mentioned, because what will happen is it will not allow you to be able to compile that particular file before if any syntax errors persist. Otherwise, if no syntax error persists, then it will be able to allow us to be able to um, uh, 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 compile successfully. Otherwise, it will not be able to compile successfully. So for logical errors, there are errors in logic, like you want to say A plus B, but you meant A times B. Those ones you might not be able to trace by hand. So, and again, we are at a low level where we're not going to do test case development. So again, one way or another is you just output the value and check if the correct value, and if it's not correct, you can go back to your formula or your expression and check how it works out. If everything works out, then you can be able to now, if everything doesn't work out rather as you expect, then you can go ahead and now correct, make the changes, make the corrections. Then you'll be able to now run the program again and check if the bug has been fixed. Awesome. So I think with that, we can now go ahead and discuss something else, which is basically what we call JavaScript event handling. How do we handle events in JavaScript? Now, if you have looked at what you have been doing all along, most of the things we have just been writing JavaScript code, and yes, basically we are putting it on maybe on the page, maybe on the console, maybe on an alert box, and so on and so forth. It might not be very useful for us to be able to run our programs like that. Let me give an example of, as you can see, I'm not capturing any data from users here. I'm just using variables to be able to have those data and perform some calculations. What if I want to write an actual application where somebody can actually put in the variables, they can do the calculations, then they can get the output on the screen. And ideally, that's how most programs work. And that's where now event handling or HTML events come into play. How do we attach elements? How do you attach events to JavaScript elements? So that's going to be our topic for discussion now. So I'll just create a new file and I'll call it JavaScript events. Okay, not let's just say JS events dot HTML. So this is now the real power of JavaScript. So I'll discuss this. I'll go live on that particular page. It's going to be blank. I'll initiate emmet and I'll say JS events. So we will need to target some elements on the page. We need to target elements on the page, and when we target elements on a page, we have to select these elements. But of course, first of all, we have to create the elements themselves. So I'm just going to create very simple elements. We're not going to do some fancy UI for this example, but we're just going to have something that works. So let's say we have two inputs. For inputting the first number, inputting the second number, then a button that says calculate. Then I'm able to get my results at the bottom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I'm going to put a H1, and I'm going to say, welcome to our calculator. Something like that, calculator, right. So then I'll put here maybe a label. Well, maybe I can say click at the bottom below to perform the calculation. Perfect. So I'll just refresh that. So that's good. So now moving forward, I want to put two buttons. I want to put two inputs. So I'll have a label here, and the label will be for num1. So I'll put first number. Then I'll put an input of type number because I expect only numbers. Then I'll give it an ID of num1. Then I also give it a name of num1. So I have the first number over there. Then I can put a break or a paragraph. Then I can put another label and I'll put here for num2. Then I call it second number, for example, right? So with that, then I can go ahead and now put another input of type number with an ID of num2, like that. Then give it also a name of num2, like that. Then of course I'll put a paragraph. Then I'll put a paragraph. Then now I'll put a button for doing the calculation. So I'll put here button with is some numbers. Then so that will be the idea of the button. So the value will be calculate, right? So I have two numbers here. Then I have calculate button. Then I will have now another div here where I want to output my results. So I can simply put a paragraph there, and that's what my results is going to be. So by default, it has a value of 00. So there's the or I can say the calculation is the answer is 00, whatever it's going to be. So this is kind of an example of what we want to do to see how event delegation works in, or rather event attachment works in JavaScript. Now for us to work with events, first of all we need to be able to know how we can select the elements as far as JavaScript is concerned. So element selection. Now when it comes to element selection, so I'll use here create. So first of all, we need to know how to select elements. So how do you select elements? There are so many ways you can select elements. The easiest way to select element is by ID. So you can select an element by ID because as you can see, each and every element here I've given it an ID. I've given the first number an ID. I've given the second number an ID. I've given the button an ID. I've given the results also an ID. So in short, I have given most elements IDs. And the easiest way to select element by IDs is now you can declare those elements as variables. So I can say const um, num1 field the first number is document.getElement by ID, then I'll put the ID of that element. Now, this ID is case sensitive. So if I write capital N here, it will not work out. Okay, that will not work out. So it is case sensitive. So I can use document.getElement by ID. Alternatively, this is sometimes very long, but it works. So I can also declare another one. For number two, let me use a different method for selecting number two. I can put here comma, can comma separate them. So instead of saying number two is document.getElement by ID, I can say document.querySelector. And this is what we're going to be using into the future. Query selector, then you will put, now we use CSS selectors. So when you say query selector, then we use CSS selectors. Now this is very, very powerful because I can use class names, I can use names of object, I can use attribute selectors, I can use pseudo selectors, I can use state selectors. So I can use any CSS selector that I know. It will still be able to find the element based on that selector. So I prefer to use method number two. So query selector, then select element by ID. This is how we select an element by ID as far as CSS is concerned. So all of them are going to give you the same thing. So this is going to get you the element, which is this one, and extract its value. So of course I need to come here and say dot value. Then again here I'll come and say dot value. So get the element, then extract its value like that. So that will store the values inside these numbers, right? Now, of course, here I need to be able to know when I click on this button, then the calculation should happen. So I also need to come and calculate this and also pick that button. So I'll simply say calculate button is equals document with query selector. I'll say some numbers because that's the ID of the button. So you can see some numbers, that's totally fine. Then I also need to select where the results are going to be stored, right? So I can simply say here again, result field is get element by ID that. Okay. Actually, sorry, these are supposed to be a bit that way. So that's fine. So what I've done is I have selected elements. So I have this and this are actually representing this icon, this button rather, and this space where we do want to do our calculation. So the other thing is we want to be able to perform the calculation. So to perform the calculation, of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to um, cut these ones because if I assign them on load, because this is going to assign them on load, that won't work out because they'll be blank. So I want to assign them when I'm performing the calculation. So I'll write here a function sum numbers. It takes two things. It takes the first value, which is num1 and num2. Okay. Then once it takes num1 and num2, I'll simply say um, return um, num1 plus num2. Copilot is really trying so hard to complicate my life, but this function is going to be this simple. Now, the other thing that's going to happen now is if I sum two numbers, that is well, maybe when it comes to summing the numbers, well, let me just not give it any variables, but let me just declare them down here like that. So I'll const this. Yeah, that should work. Now, so when I say some numbers, what it will do is it will go to the page, get an element with ID num1, get its value stored in num1, then do the other, get num2, then sum the two of them and return them back for me. So when I click on this button, I want to output the results down here. So what I'm going to do here, there are two things you can do, and this is actually the best. This is the recommended way of adding the events as far as as far as JavaScript is concerned. What I could have done here is I would have come to this button and have said on click, then I simply call the function sum numbers. Okay. So what I would have done here is I would have said, well, this will only return for me the values. Of course, if I don't want to return the values, I want to put them on these results down here. I would have now picked this results field. Then I say dot inner HTML, then is equals to, then I simply say now which is num1 plus num2. Now, when you're working with JavaScript, you also need to be very careful with additions because if you add numbers, it sometimes adds them as text. So sometimes it becomes a bit of a problem. So again, it's just this is just a very simple example. I'm not doing any form sort of validation, but of course, as we move along, you're going to see how that works out. So here, what I'm just trying to do is to show you that I can declare the calculate button as a button. I go to the page and extract it, then store it in a variable, same as the result field. Then I can declare a function that says calculate two numbers. Then it will pick whatever is here and here, then output the value here, which is what this is actually doing. So let's see if that works out. So if I say 50 plus 40, it should give me 90. So you can see it's giving me 50 40 because it's adding this one as a text and this one as a text. So if you want to make sure that they are numbers, we can use pass float. It will convert the text to a float. Then it will add the other one. So you can also say this pass float. Subtraction, multiplication, and other methods will work fine because you cannot perform an arithmetic operation on string. But when it comes to addition, then just convert them. Pass float will convert whatever is here into an actual number. And again, pass flow will convert whatever is here into a number, then add them together as numbers. So here you can say now 50 plus 40 and say calculate, you can see now it gives me 90. Now you can see now this is actually very useful because now I have an actual working application that an architect can come and say take 560 plus maybe 240, then give me the result, it is 800. So you can see now this is actually useful because now I can capture data from the end user and I can be able to actually click on this button, it does the calculation and it outputs the results for me over here. And as you can see, it does not it does not refresh the page. Everything is working on the fly. All right. So this is actually a very classic example of how you would work with events. Now I have put the event on the button here, so you can say when you click on the button, then it should run this function. Of course, I enclose the function in uh, in normal quotation marks. But this is not the recommended way of doing it. This is not a very nice way of doing it because I don't like mixing JavaScript with HTML. Even though in some other frameworks that we have out there, like maybe Angular or even Vue or most of the or even React, most of the frameworks we have out there do this kind of a thing. I don't like it. I'd rather have JavaScript completely separate in a separate file and HTML on completely separate HTML file. Same with CSS and any other technology that I might be using. So this is not a very good idea, even though as you can see, it will be able to work out. So 1500 plus 240 should give me 1740. That would work because when you click on the button, it will simply call this function. So let me give you the other option that I like. So this is there and it would work fine. The other option is I would come here because I've declared this variable, this button as a variable. I will attach an event to this button. So I'll say calculate. It's actually supposed to be calculated. Calculate. Yeah, calculate button, right? Something like that. So since I've declared this calculate button, I can come here and say calculate button dot add event listener, and the event listener I'm adding is click. Then, of course, once I do that, I can simply run some numbers, which is actually here. So you can see I'm not calling it with brackets. Previously, I was calling it with brackets, but now I'm not calling it with brackets. So if I do that, this is a nice way of doing it because you can now see my HTML is very clear. It is not convoluted with JavaScript code and stuff like that. So this is actually a nicer way of doing it. Now, because these some numbers does not expect any variables, then this will be able to work out. Otherwise, if it was accepting variables, then you cannot write it like that. So you have to call it with all its variables, right? So what I can do here is again, I'll simply put 894 plus 360 and say calculate, and you can still see it works perfectly. So again, as I've mentioned, if the function does not have variables, then you can just call the function directly like this. Otherwise, if a function requires or accepts variables, what I would do is something like this. I would simply come here and I would say the same function, but now here I'll use a callback function like that. Then now I will call my sum numbers here. Now that is if this has parameters. So, but and again, either way, I usually like this method best, whether the function has parameters or not. So again, if I write it that way, it should still be able to work out. And you can see it worked out fine. Now, why is this nice? It is nice because sometimes this might be returning the value like that. Then I can simply come and say here, const results is equals, then I call the function name like that. So now I have results. Now I can now pick my results field here and give it the value down there. So I can simply say um, the total of maybe say well, this one might not work because the values are not coming from here. So I can simply the total is, then I'll put my no, small, yeah, it's just brackets. Then I'll put my values here like that. I only need one. Inner HTML is equals to total is yeah, here, one here. I need another one. Just a minute. I think maybe I missed something here. Okay. I need this. I need to close that. So then I can enclose this one into now the curly brackets. Like, yeah, I think that should now be able to work. So you can see now what I've simply done is I've just made sure that this function now returns the addition of those two numbers. So it returns that value as a value. But then once I have that value, then I can now use it to do anything with it. Maybe I can multiply it by two. I can add it to other things, amongst many other things. So sum two numbers does not necessarily need to output the value on an interface, but it can return for me the number that has been summed. Then I decide what I want to do with that result, which in this particular case is I just want to be able to output it on the screen on the inner HTML of this. So again, I can come here and I'll say 589 plus maybe that. Then I say calculate, and you can see the total is now that, which is totally awesome. All right. So this is how we actually add events on JavaScript. Now, events are many. The first one I've added here is just click, but we have quite a number of events that we can be able to add. Like, for example, we have click, we have change, we have input, we have on focus, we have on load, and there are so many numerous events that JavaScript support depending on the object that you're working with. If you're working with text or numbers, generally inputs will have things like on change, on mount, on key up, on key down, things like that. So when somebody presses a key, for example, I don't want you to be able to type things that are not numbers here. So somebody can type here things that are not numbers, right? Even though I have put number, if I had put text and or if somebody is using an older browser, a number would not be found, so it will default this thing back to a text. So I want to be able to make sure that if somebody is typing something, then whatever they're typing is actually a number, not a text. So I'll use something like either key down or key press or things like that. So when it comes to events, you can have as many events as possible. Here, I'm just showing us that I added a click event over this. But then again, maybe what if I wanted to change the color of this? I know we can do that with CSS and we can put hover. So maybe when I click on it and it has calculated, maybe I want to change the color to green. Before you calculate, the color is red. So what I could do here is when the form is loading, I'll take this calculate button and maybe I give it a color of red. So here then I'll select dot style dot color. Then I put is equals to red, not blue. Let me just say background is red, and maybe yeah, something like that. So once I calculate, I want to change the color to be blue. Of course, you can see this is not a number because I'm trying to add things that are not numbers, so it's telling me not a number. So that's perfectly okay. Now once you have clicked it, we want the values to now become green. So what I can simply say is, and this is why I declare this button as a variable, because now I might want to call it very many times to do very many things with it. That's why I declared it as a variable. It's the best way to do it. But of course, you can always be jumping in and out of DOM if you feel like that's going to be good for you. So once the calculation has been done, I can come here and once I have my results, I can change the color to green. So the style dot background to green. So what will happen is if I say here 578 plus that, then I say calculate. Now you can see the color has become green because I have done my calculation. So when it comes to events, there are several things that can happen. As I was mentioning, what I've used here is just click. But again, depending on the elements that you're targeting, like if somebody is typing on this field, I can check the key up, the key down, the hover, the focus, the mouse in, the mouse out, and all this kind of stuff. So I can't be able to achieve that. Now, let's just do one other thing, which is validating this data over here. Now, as you can see, if I don't have data over here, let me just refresh the page. If I don't have any data, I can still calculate and it tells me that is not a number. This plus this is not a number because I'm adding blank to blank, which is not a number. We want to tell somebody, hey, please provide the numbers. Please provide number one, please provide number two, and so forth, right? So when somebody clicks on the calculate button, before we do the summation, which is these numbers over here, what we will do is we'll check. We'll say if maybe say well, I can declare them as constants. Const num1 equals the number one field. Well, I didn't declare the number fields, but actually it's usually a good thing to define them first because we want to use them over and over again. So num1 field is equals to num1, num2, the same thing. So like that. So I've declared number one field and number two field, so that in the future, when you are when you want to to refer to them, you don't need to jump in and out of the DOM every other time. Simply pick the variable and it will be pointing to that particular object. So that's why it's important to store them as variables. So here what I'm going to say is if pass float, or you can just use the number function, if number, and if has to be in bracket. So if number and n is capital N, JavaScript is case sensitive, num1. Otherwise, if it is not. So if it is not, or rather if it is equals to 0, if number1 is equals to 0, then what I'm going to do is um, I'm going to put some notification here. So what I'll do here, let me add a notification. So notification area, I'll say document dot query selector, document dot query selector, notification. Then I'll come and put the notifications up here. So I'll put here notifications, notification area, right? Sorry. Yeah, so I have notification here. You can't see it, it's blank, but it's actually there right before the first number. So before the first number, actually, let me put it, yeah, just right before the first number. So, and we've given it an idea of notification area. Let me just confirm that that's the name that we have used. Notification area, that's the name that we have used. That's perfect. So we're calling it notification area as a variable. So if number1 is equals to 0, I'll simply say notification area dot inner HTML is equals, please enter a valid first number. Something of the sort, right? Something of the sort. Otherwise, I'll say else if number, then I'll say num2 is equals to 0. Then I'll also tell them to output that. Otherwise, I will clear the notification and of course, I will now do the calculations. So what will happen here is when I click on this button, I'll first of all check if num1, which is this, well, did I put num1? I didn't assign num1 to a value, so I'll simply say here, const, num1 is that, yeah, that should be okay now. So I've declared number1 and I've given it the field, the content of num1 field. Then I've taken num2 and then another variable, give it the content of num2 field. Then I'm checking if num1 is equals to 0. Then I'll tell the user there's a problem. Otherwise, if it is greater than 0, I'll check if the second number is not a 0. Then I'll also, if it's a 0, I'll raise an error. If the two of them are not zeros, then I'll go ahead and perform this calculation. Of course, I will clear the error. So this is clearing the error. I'll clear the error, then I can go ahead and do my calculations. So here when I calculate, you can see to tell me enter a valid first number first. Then when I enter the valid first number like that, ideally as I'm typing the first number, then this should disappear because now I have a value. So I'm just trying to show you how the different events will trigger. So what I'm going to come down here is I'm going to say um, clear notification when the user types on a field. When user types on an input field. So you might target field by field, but if you're going to have a lot of fields, then it's not going to be advisable to go field by field. I can have 10 fields. So if I have 10 fields, I don't attach event to one or two. It will be too tedious, though you could do that. So what I can do is I can give this, I can just go ahead and select an input that is of type number or just an input. Whenever somebody clicks on an input, then we can just go ahead and execute that code. So what I'm going to do here, I can declare another input field. So I can come here and say input field is equals document.query selector input. It doesn't have to be any type. Well, it can be a type number if I'm targeting this number fields, which is totally okay. I think that would work. So long as the input is of type number, then I'll consider that an input field. So then I'll simply pick that input field because it will capture both this and this. And by the way, if I'm going to say, if I'm going to have more than one field, I'll use query selector all. So you can see there is query selector and there is query selector all. Then this query selector, it will pick the first item that matches whatever you've specified. But query selector all will return all the elements that match the selector that you've put inside here. So that's just something that you need to be very sorry. That's something you need to be a bit careful with. Query selector R, query selector and query selector all. All will return all the occurrences of things meeting the filtration criteria that the selection criteria you've specified here. But query selector will pick the first one that matches the selection that you've put inside here. That's why for IDs, I only expect one, so that's why I'm using query selector. All right. Okay, so again here I should have used query selector. It would have been much nicer. I like query selector, but even though that one will still be able to work out. So query selector, then these ones I use the IDs like that. Yeah, that looks elegant. The other one I was just trying to explain how get element by ID works, which is totally fine also. So again, whenever somebody is typing on an input field, so I'll come to this input field, then I'll say on. Well, I can use on, but I can say add event listener. The event listener here is going to be input like that. So on the input, I'll simply change, whenever you start typing, I'll simply change the background to red because then it means that I want you to do the calculations all over again. So, well, I don't need the target name, so it's just going to be an input. So whenever you type on an input that is a number, I'll simply remove or clear the errors. Then I'll change this color back to red because it could have been green during calculation, and then we are good to go. So let me just remove these two lines over here and move these ones backwards, like that. That's the code that I'm looking at. So this is not query selector; it's actually input field. Input field, you learn an event listener. Input means as somebody is typing on the field itself. So when I come back here and I click on this, you can see it still tells me, please enter valid number. So when I start typing a number, well, that should have uh, that should have allowed me to clear. Input field is input of type number. This input of type number, yeah. That should work. Let me just see. Well, maybe just say I want an input. Let me say that, then start typing, or maybe say dot on key down when a key goes down. Uh, that's strange. Let me see. Input field, add event listener, key down, then run the following callback function. Okay. Maybe let me just return it as it were. Let me see. If the target name, no, that won't work out. And this is also input field. And I want to add an event listener of key down or key press. You press on any key, then yeah. So yeah, I think this should work. Why it's not working? I have absolutely no idea, but that should actually work. That should actually work. Let me see. Do I have any errors? So probably maybe there could be another error. Yeah, so add event listener, input field dot add event listener, input field dot add event listener. So I have just input field here. Yeah, that should work because I've. Let me just use an input field. Oh, let me use a class name. Um, dot input. Then I'll give these two classes of inputs. So this type, I'll give it a class of inputs. Then this other one, I also give it a class of input. So it says it's not a function in number six. Okay. So I have an input with a class of, okay, sorry. So yeah, I think that should now allow me to work. Is this one inside anything else? No, it's not. It's independent. Yeah, why is it giving me that? That should actually now be okay. Let me just move it up here after the declaration. Okay, that should. Why is it telling me that input field is not? Why is it telling me that input field and input field is actually there? Query select. Uh, yeah, query selector is fine. Hmm. That should actually be okay. Let me just try out something here. Let me just say console.log. That actually looks okay. I don't know why it's giving me an error, so I'll simply say input fields. So yeah, I have two. Yeah, I have zero. Yeah, so actually it's okay because it's actually getting the inputs to one and two. Mm, oh, I think the issue is I need to go through each and every one of them and attach this. So yeah, I think I'm used to JavaScript and to jQuery rather, and jQuery will do it differently. So what I need to do is I'll simply use for each. So I'll simply say input field dot for each. Yeah, so this actually would work out. So because this is going to be an array of elements and not a single element, it's an array of elements, then I'll go through each of the elements in the array. Then for each of those elements as an input, then I will add an event listener of key press. When you press on the key or key down or whatever it is, then you should be able to perform this operation. So that is the mistake that I was making. I was trying to because this one is returning an array of objects, I have to look through each array element and attach this event manually. So sorry about that. So again, it can you can still take it down there and it will still be able to work. So this is the mistake that I had made. So I'll cut this one, then I'll bring it down here. So now this is a different event as you can see. So there's a key press event, which means on all the input fields that you have, I have a key press event that when you press on that particular key, it will clear a notification and of course return this text box to red. So let me click on that. I'll see an error. So once I start typing, you can see the error goes away. This comes back to red. So if I add a number and I say calculate, this one becomes green. When I start adding a new number, again it becomes red and I can calculate and I can go on and on and on. So you can see I'm trying to attach different events on my elements on the page and stuff like that. And that is how you work with you work with HTML events. So you can use various ways as I mentioned. One, of course, is you can be able to attach it directly on the component using the event name over here. So for example, on this button, I can simply say on click, then I can tell it to run some function over here. So some function, something like that. So it will run this function. Of course, you have to have written that function inside JavaScript over here. As I said, this is not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is what I have recommended here, which is doing an add event listener. Then from adding event listener, now you can be able to perform a very serious logic inside here. However, you'd like to play around with your project. So that is basically it. I think I'll take a break at this juncture as far as this particular course is concerned. Then I believe that you should now be able to do a simple question. So I'll probably urge you to try it out. Maybe do a simple calculator by yourself. See how you can be able to maybe add or subtract or divide or do any sort of arithmetic operation as far as this experience is concerned. Then you should be able to get things up and going. I'll share this code with you so that you can be able to review it in the event that something was not clear. So without further ado, I think I'll take a break at that. Then probably we'll meet again next time. Thank you and have a wonderful